what happens if we actually think about integrity not just simply as the absence of corruption, but actually as a much more positive and substantive concept, and perhaps a concept with which we might get more traction in changing our government than just simply focusing on minimising corruption. If we think about abuse of office in this kind of very minimum standards approach, first thing is that it only allows us to evaluate a very narrow set of negative behaviours. So, and unethical behaviours. So it doesn't capture any analysis of, for example, being inefficient or using your office to achieve ideological gain. Right? You know, in corruption it says, well, it's only corrupt if you use it for private gain, but not for ideological gain. Small things like stealing stationery don't apply. It also, it doesn't take in the way in which we might interpret our rules or interpret the bounds of our office in very convenient ways that serve our own private interests, but are, as it were, not breaches of any minimum standards rules. And I think the most important thing is that, if you have a corruption approach and that's your major tool that you want to use, it means you constantly have to create more and more rules, more and more minimum standards, which means you have to regulate the public officer more and more finely tuned. But of course, as you know, whenever you actually try to practice that, rules run out, because rules always have to be set at some level of generality, and within that rules have to be interpreted and have to leave discretion. But the idea of corruption gives you no ability to analyse what you do within that. Who watched Yes Minister? Anyone? Yeah. Well, my mum forced me to in the 80s. And I always think of does anyone remember the hospital episode?
Yeah.
So
hospital without any patients.
Yeah, so it's so it's Sir Humphrey's favourite hospital in the whole system. It's the best performing hospital minister. It's the absolute pinnacle of public servant performance. And is there anything wrong with it? Well, there's only one thing wrong with it. There's no patience. Now you could think about that. That would be an environment in which there is absolutely no corruption at the individual level. You can imagine every pen pusher pushing pens in the most effective minimum standards way that you can want. No one is stealing pens. No one's abusing their office for any private gain. Yet it seems that it's not merely that the hospital is failing a performance target. In fact, it's probably fulfilling the performance targets, because part of the problem is it's only performance targets for targets around administrative efficiency. But it's actually it's corrupt at some level, or I would argue it lacks integrity in a way that's just not captured by our current definition of corruption. There seems to be something that's ethically wrong with that institution that's just not captured in our current conceptual tools. If we just focus upon fighting corruption as our number one ethical and only ethical aim with respect to institution, it creates a lot of problems. So first of all, it can lead to a compliance culture. So that's going to match up with a psychological framework, which means you prioritise making sure that you fulfil the rules all the time, but also then you feel you're only accountable for fulfilling the rules and not what you do beyond them. Rather than, as it were, thinking about what am I meant to do within the rules or despite the rules? What is the actual point of being here? And that, as it were, can lead to a lot of inefficiencies in your organisation. So there's a lot of work that says there's a limit to the amount of rules that you can have about corruption until it becomes completely counterproductive to performance.